It's always great at this event that's held every year that you get to meet people who are at the centre of international events and to give their perspective on what's going on in their country and in the international arena at large. And today's no exception because we've got the President of Kosovo here, Vjosa Osmani. Thank you very much for coming here, giving us your time. And as part of your job, I understand you're effectively in charge of your country's foreign policy and Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces as well. So there's plenty of scope for discussion in all these kinds of areas today. But first of all, I wanted to start off by talking about the theme of this forum this year is reclaiming diplomacy in a fragmented world. So diplomacy has been a key part of Kosovo's sort of process for recognition over the years, also the normalization process with Serbia as well. Can you just talk a bit about that to start us off with, please?
Of course. Such a great pleasure to be here. Herkese günaydın, merhabalar. It is, perhaps just to begin, the Antalya Diplomacy Forum is one of those places, one of those forums that is bringing leaders together to not just talk, but also deliver. We've seen it in the past couple of years, how it has become the center of so much discussion of leaders from across countries that sometimes don't talk to one another elsewhere. So I would like to start by thanking President Erdogan and Minister Hakan Fidan for delivering for diplomacy in a very, very fragmented world. You will hear leaders oftentimes saying that this is probably one of the most difficult times that our continent and the wider world is facing. But if you ask us in Kosovo, it was as difficult about 2 decades ago. It was, if you ask people from Bosnia and Herzegovina, they will tell you it was as difficult about 3 decades ago. We are a living example of resilient nations who grew up from the ashes, from countries that were entirely destroyed to the ground because of dictators, because of genocidal regimes who wanted to wipe us off from the face of the earth. But again, our nation is an example of how the world got together and did not turn a blind eye before the suffering and the oppression of a people that had been suffering for centuries. So while at the same time we are facing challenges, there are examples around the world that could be seen at as enormous successes of world's democracies when they got together, as a testament to what they can achieve when they stand for the values of freedom, the values of democracy, and the values of human rights. And Kosovo is that example. When I travel across the world, I see a lot of pessimism around roundtables where leaders sit. And let me give you an example. We had this peace forum on Ukraine in Switzerland less than a year ago, I believe. About more than 100 countries participated in many international organizations. And I had to remind the leaders there that just about 25 years ago, I was that child of war that was displaced from her home alongside my family and practically all of my people, hiding in the mountains from those who wanted to kill us. And we had a little tiny radio, and alongside other children, we were listening to a meeting of international leaders who were talking about Kosovo. All of our hopes, all of the hopes of those children of war were hanging onto what those leaders were talking about. 25 years ago, those leaders decided to come to our rescue, giving me the opportunity 25 years later to go back, to thank them for saving our lives and giving us a chance to build a strong country, a thriving economy, a resilient democracy, but most importantly, to build peace. So I asked them to do the same for the children around the world who are now suffering war, and to understand that their words matter, their action matters, and they should not stop using every diplomatic means whatsoever to save lives. Because oftentimes when people talk about the UN Charter, they go straight to Chapter 7, Chapter 8, Chapter 9. And my question is, how about we start from the preamble? How about we read about the very purpose of why these international organizations were created? Why was the UN created for the first place? To stop human suffering. So to conclude with this, I think in order to reclaim diplomacy, we need a people-centered approach. We need to bring back humanity to decision-making. We need to put human suffering as the centerpiece of our decision-making. How do we stop human suffering? How do we make sure that in every decision that we make, in every paper that we sign, in every meeting that we have, we never forget it's about the people that we represent. It's not just a piece of paper. It's never just a document. It's about our future. For the very first time in the history of our nation, our children's generation are living in peace without knowing war. Every generation before our kids had to go through a war. Our grandparents, parents, we had to go through a war. The fact that we have a first generation of children in Kosovo that have not known fear, that don't have to go to bed with the sounds of firearms and bombings and shellings, that is a historical achievement that every international leader contributed to, should be proud. And these are the kind of successes that we need to showcase to tell the leaders of today that it is possible. When they try, when they use every instrument possible, and when they put a people-centered approach on the table, peace is possible and diplomacy delivers.
So what have been the main foundations of Kosovo's approach over the last few decades? Because you're still going through this process of getting international recognition from all of the countries around the world. You've still got the negotiations with Serbia, also the European Union and such like. But what are the main sort of tenets of what you are doing in these processes at the moment?
So since its declaration of independence, Kosovo has approached countries around the world, extending a hand of friendship, extending a hand of cooperation, explaining that recognizing Kosovo's independence is a process through which no one would lose anything. Quite the opposite. Countries that have recognized us have gained a friend, a partner, and an ally that they can count on shared values and shared interests. So far, 118 countries have recognized Kosovo's independence, Kenya being the latest nation to do so. We are very confident that we're starting off a new process, a new momentum of gaining more recognitions. But of course, it's a very complex process because Serbia, with the support of a few countries, dictatorships, obviously, have been fighting us all along. And in this sense, of course, they are misinforming and they are spewing propaganda, telling nations, look, Kosovo's status has not been defined yet, we're negotiating it. These are pure lies. Kosovo's status was defined once and forever on the 17th of February 2008, when Kosovo declared independence after a long process of negotiations led by UN Special Envoy Marti Ahtisaari, who then came up with a proposal for Kosovo's independence, a proposal that at that time was endorsed by the UN General Assembly and the UN Secretary General. In addition to that, the UN ICJ, the International Court of Justice, decided in 2010 that Kosovo's independence is in full compliance with international law and that no relevant provision of international law has been violated through that process. It had also clarified that Kosovo's independence is in full compliance with Resolution 1244 of the UN Security Council, which had actually outlined the process through which we can define our fate, define our status. So whether in terms of international law or whether we talk about political and historical arguments, there is absolutely no question marks on Kosovo's legality, Kosovo's independence and its compliance with international law. And in that sense, of course, we still have to work with some nations that are further away geographically, and perhaps we haven't been, a priority on their table. Every nation has their own priority, but I'm traveling across the world, creating connections, working with nations big or small, to make sure that we establish diplomatic relations. Now, these bilateral recognitions are not just bilateral, they have a bigger impact, because when Kosovo applies for membership in an international organization, we need their votes. And the international organization is not just about having a mic or a seat at the table, it's about our people as end beneficiaries. For example, the fact that we are not in Interpol yet is blocking our police from having access to important information in order to be even more successful in fighting cross-border crime. The fact that we're not in the World Health Organization has repercussions in the quality of health that we offer for our people. The fact that we are not in UNESCO, despite the fact that we're the most ancient nation in the European continent, and every day we find archaeological facts that are as old as 7,000 years old, means that we do not have the desired protection for our cultural heritage. So these are organizations from which the people benefit. So these bilateral recognitions would eventually not just be a diplomatic relation, but would eventually help our people have a better quality of life. When it comes to the dialogue with Serbia, to clarify once again, that is not a dialogue on Kosovo's status. The dialogue is about mutually beneficial issues, so far that two states discuss about. So far, these discussions have been about freedom of movement, about freedom of goods, about forcibly disappeared persons, because there are almost 2,000 people victims of the war that their bodies were forcibly disappeared from Kosovo, and they are in massive graves in Serbia. So Serbia needs to open its archives from the 90s so that we can find the bodies of these people, many of whom are little kids. Their mothers need to have a place where they can lay a flower and to remember them. So there are still very big wounds from the war. And of course, this process needs to end with mutual recognition. When I say mutual recognition, that means that we're not the only ones that are desiring recognition from Serbia. We do not recognize them in their current constitution either. So it will have to be mutual recognition, mutual establishment of diplomatic relations. So far, the current leadership of Serbia did not show the desire to move forward toward the future. However, it is very clear that they will not be able to join the European Union without this final agreement with Kosovo on mutual recognition. So we are constructively engaged in this process. We are delivering on the promises that we've made in that process, while Serbia does the opposite. They never walk the talk. However, I still believe that the dialogue is the only peaceful means through which we can resolve any issue. We must dedicate every effort for the younger generation to make sure that they only continue to live in peace. There's no more noble mission for our generation, I believe, than preserving peace. We've gone through hell ourselves. We need to make sure that our kids never have to go through what we had to go through. And for that, we need to make every effort possible to make sure that any disagreement remains at the dialogue table. Unfortunately, Serbia doesn't desire that, because they've been committing act of aggression after act of aggression. But from the side of Kosovo, we continuously commit to dialogue as the only means to resolve every issue that we have, while, of course, preserving our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, our independence, and our hard-won freedoms, because generation after generation have sacrificed for the freedom that we enjoy today.
On the issue of recognition, there are two big players on the international arena who are not recognizing Kosovo yet. That's Russia and China. So do you envisage a time when this could actually happen, that they would recognize Kosovo? And if this happens, do you think all the other countries will then recognize as well quickly afterwards?
Well, before we get to two big players that are malicious players, let me talk about two big players that have been positive players. So Kosovo has been blessed with so much international support, for which we will be eternally grateful. Two countries that have mostly supported us in receiving global recognition have been the United States of America on one side and Turkey on the other side. So I want to take this opportunity to once again, since we are here in Antalya, to thank President Erdogan for his personal engagement since when he was Prime Minister in making sure that more and more nations around the world recognize our struggle for freedom and our right to independence. And through their help, and many other countries around the world who helped us, we've managed to, as I said, so far gain the recognition from the vast majority of countries around the world. Now, there are many countries that have not recognized us yet, but that's not because Russia and China. That's because of their own domestic considerations. It's because we're not a priority yet, but we will become soon, because they don't have yet perhaps all of the relevant information that they need, and we will make sure that they get it in due time. Contacts do matter. Relations that you create through diplomacy do matter, and we've been seeing the result of that, especially in these past 4 years. And then, of course, we constantly need to fight the Serbian propaganda and the Russian propaganda. They go hand in hand. China has not been involved, although they haven't recognized us directly. They haven't been involved actively in fighting Kosovo. So it's been more of a, I would say, abstaining role rather than engaging against Kosovo. So I would rather expect China to move forward more quickly. In Russia, obviously, I don't expect Putin to do anything good either for Kosovo or for the world. So I don't have any positive expectations from their side at this point. They've been spewing propaganda after propaganda, trying to compare Kosovo to Donbass or to Crimea, which is absolutely probably one of the worst propaganda machines that one can use. Kosovo is not like Donbass or Crimea. Kosovo is like Ukraine. We were illegally occupied, illegally annexed by Serbia more than a century ago. We fought for our right to self-determination for more than a century. We went through an international process of negotiations for our final status, which was deemed in full compliance with international law by the highest world court, which is the International Court of Justice. We were recognized by the rest of the world, and genocide was committed against our people. Zelensky did not commit genocide against people in Crimea or in Donbass or in other parts of Ukraine. So there's absolutely no comparison. The only comparison, actually, that can be made is between the crimes that Milosevic committed against us and the crimes that Putin is committing against the people of Ukraine. So the two dictators, the two aggressors, the two hegemonic imperialistic minds that want to kill and destroy, they're the same. So we will continue to fight this propaganda that Russia's spewing around. It's not going to be easy because we do understand the powers that Russia has, but we're blessed with friends and partners around the world who are helping us in this regard. And once again, I want to show the gratitude of the people of Kosovo for every nation that so far has recognized our independence in this way, gaining a friend, a partner, and an ally that will stand with them when there's thick and thin. We might be a small country, but I strongly believe that the impact of a country should not be defined by its size or geography, but by the story it has to tell. And the story of Kosovo is one of resilience, is one of hope, is one of a people that, against all odds, managed to keep its identity, to defend its identity, despite of many years of occupation and hardship, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. And it's also a story of the power of alliances, alliances that are based on values, that are built on shared beliefs. It's a story that tells us all the power of partnerships, how important partnerships are. No matter how small you are, if you have the right partners, if you have the right allies, if you have friends by your side, whether in life or in diplomacy, you will succeed.
Just one more point on the negotiations with Serbia. At the moment, it seems most of the mediation is being done by the European Union, and there's the Berlin process going on at the same time as well. So are you happy with how this mediation process is going on? Is there sort of heading in an optimistic direction at the moment?
Now, we're not happy with how it went in the past 4 years, for sure. There's been a complete lack of balance by the European Union, putting Kosovo under repercussions, and then Serbia practically being the spoiled child of Europe during the past couple of years, despite of their continuous violations of the agreements that were achieved in Brussels, despite the violence that they have been using through acts of aggression and terrorist attacks against Kosovo, despite of their continuous efforts to destroy Bosnia-Herzegovina from within and cause trouble in our region. Yet, if you look at how the European Union assistance for the Western Balkans is divided, Serbia gets about 63% alone, whereas the rest of us, the 5 of us in the Western Balkans, we get 37% together. And guess what? We are the ones that are 100% aligned with the EU foreign and defense policy, whereas Serbia only has a 40% alignment. So it's like the message that was sent in the past couple of years was that the less you are aligned with the EU, the more support you get. And if you are delivering, whether on alignment or on values, then you're completely forgotten. And that has not been an approach that has supported our region's furtherance towards European integration, quite the opposite. And it has also destroyed the credibility of the EU-led process in the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. Now there's a new momentum because we have a new HRVP, we have a new representative for the dialogue. We've been working closely with them to deliver on all of the information that they need. And I believe we have a more positive momentum when it comes to how the process will be seen from now on. But bringing back balance and equality to the table is key to the success of any negotiation process, not just the one between Kosovo and Serbia. We haven't seen that so far. Right now, we see more willingness to bring that balance and the equal footing between the parties. And if that happens, I'm optimistic that there might be more positive results. A final point on this. The Berlin process has never been about negotiations between Kosovo and Serbia. It's where all 6 Western Balkan countries and other partners sit down to deliver on issues of practical importance like freedom of movement and goods. But it's an important process nevertheless because it brings the region together. But the point that I wanted to add is I've been always asking for a stronger involvement by the United States in this process because history shows in these 14 years that the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia has been ongoing, the more stronger the U.S. role, the more agreements that are deliverable. The less involvement from the U.S., there are less agreements and less successes. So I think with President Trump now in power and through his peace through strength formula, we might get a better sense of how much more the U.S. would be involved, and I think that would only bring a more positive outcome also to the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia.
It's good you brought up the issue of President Trump there because that's my next question. I'm wondering, now that he's in office for a second term, and there's a lot of talk within Europe about strategic autonomy, there's this feeling that Europe is going to have to do a lot more things for itself, particularly because of what's going on with the war in Ukraine at the moment and other issues. So has this affected the thinking in Kosovo, for instance? I read recently the Prime Minister announced a 60% increase in defence spending for the next 4 years. So is this related to this, or maybe Serbia, or something else? And what is the thinking in Kosovo on this issue at the moment?
In a fragmented world and with all of the conflicts going on, not just in our continent but also beyond, I think we needed that wake-up call before the alarm was sounded by the United States. In Kosovo, we did understand that we need to step up in defense even before President Trump was elected, which is why we've quadrupled investment in defense in this past mandate. We already achieved the 2% GDP threshold, which is was so far the NATO threshold, and we're planning to actually double that down in this next mandate. Not just because it's a necessity because of what is going on European-wise, but just locally. We had not invested in our defense sufficiently for so many years. And now the time has come to build a very strong defense army, one that would be able to defend Kosovo against anyone that might attack us. And of course, in our region, there's only one source of the stability, and that is Serbia. We've never had any problem with any of our neighbors, other neighbors. Quite the opposite. We have excellent relations that are delivering for our people with everyone else in the region. But Serbia has been that source of instability, causing problems in Kosovo, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the rest. And they keep purchasing weapons from Russia, from Belarus, from China. They have purchased the FK3 system, the only country in Europe to do so. And they're also talking with Iran about Shahid drones and so on and so forth. So we have a problem in our neighborhood, and we need to be ready to protect ourselves from that problem. And the sooner we do that, the better. So we fully support President Trump's formula, which, as he said, is also about our own interest as a European continent. And I see more and more European countries now delivering, increasing their expenditures on defense. In the long term, it's going to be in our own interest as a continent to make sure that we are more resilient. So this journey of self-reliance in terms of defense is, I think, existential for Europe. But that doesn't mean that the Euro-Atlantic alliance should not endure. Quite the opposite. While we, as a continent, spend more on defense, we should also aim to further strengthen our alliance with the United States. For global peace and security, the Euro-Atlantic alliance has been the very fundament of it. So each and every one of us, no matter how big or small, as countries, should contribute to keeping that relationship with the United States strong. There might be disagreements here and there, but I think the values for which we work to protect are so much bigger than these disagreements that might get on the way. So as Kosovo, we've been trying to contribute to that. We are going to go ahead and remove the 10% tariff on U.S. goods because it's better for our economy, it's for our interests. But after all, this is not just about tariffs. This is about strategic alliances. This is about strategic alliances. This is about long-term thinking. And in that sense, as a country, we need to do everything in our power to make sure that we set an example and we deliver on issues that someone might say, oh, you're doing that just because President Trump is saying. No, we're doing it because, after all, it's in our interest. It's in our interest as well to have strong partners, to have strong allies, and to make sure that we also give back when they might need us. Because alliances are not just about taking, they're also about giving. And of course, we have smaller capacities in terms of global support, but Kosovo has become from an exporter of stability to, from an importer of stability to an exporter of stability. Now our soldiers are serving in peacekeeping missions around the world, shoulder to shoulder with US Army, with UK Army, with Turkish Army, and what an outstanding example this is. You know, 25 years ago, your soldiers came to our country to save our lives. And now those young kids who you saved are grown-up soldiers in a Kosovo uniform serving alongside you in peacekeeping missions around the world. So it's a story of success, resilience, and hope, and a story of giving back to our allies, friends, and partners. So again, President Trump has a different way of doing things. I think it's called, you know, he delivers. Mm-hmm. He delivers, and he has been delivering. It was like that in his first mandate. Now it's even with a much stronger impetus. In Kosovo, we want to work very closely with him, especially when it comes to defense. Our main defense partners so far have been the United States and Turkey, also in terms of purchasing defense capabilities, training, and so far. And we aim at doubling down, at least doubling down on that partnership. So making sure that we purchase more, we train more, we serve together more, and we contribute as much as we can.
I just had a couple more questions. I know we're sort of running out of time a little bit, but one was related to what we were just talking about how a lot of international analysts at the moment are talking about how the world is going through a lot of change, that there's going to be a new multipolar world. There are going to be other mid-ranking countries that are going to come into their own, and I know the Turkish government believes that this is the case at the moment. But Kosovo, a very small country, 1.5 million population. So how does it see its sort of role in this? And then I also wanted to ask, if we have time, about relations with the Turkish government, because, as you said, it's been very supportive of Kosovo over the years. It was one of the first to recognize the country, but also it's tried to help in mediation at times with Serbia. But what are the plans going forward with the Turkish government?
Look, I've seen it firsthand in these past 25 years that I work with the public institutions, most of these years engaged in foreign affairs, that size does matter, but it's not the only thing. We see big countries that are not being able to deliver their messages, and we see smaller countries who, through soft power, have been much more powerful in delivering messages. Kosovo has been one of those countries. The world knows about us. The world takes our example and showcases it. For example, we have built such strong support systems for the victims of the war that now these support systems are being shared with countries around the world. About 20,000 women were raped in Kosovo during the war by the Milosevic regime, and the support system that we've built for the survivors are now being shared by my special envoys on sexual violence during the war worldwide. They go to Ukraine, they go to the Middle East, they go to Africa, and they support women organizations around the world. Our army is training the Ukrainian army. Our experts are training people around the world on demining, which is very important even after the war ends. So Kosovo is giving back, and it's punching above its weight. So I think it's also about the methods that you use to have a voice, to have a strong voice in the world. And it's, of course, size and economy matters, but it's definitely not the only thing. We've been managed to be present and to have our voice heard at much larger scales than the 1.6, 1.7 million that we have, or just the territory that we have, and we'll continue to do so. I believe in a world where, as I said, it's the story that you tell that determines your impact. We've seen that in the past, and I think we will work with our allies to do that in the future as well. Just about a year ago, I was invited to the US-Africa Business Forum, just to give you an example. I'm neither from the US nor from Africa, but I was invited to give the keynote speech to the US-Africa Business Forum. And it was because the United States wanted to showcase African countries the example of Kosovo, on how we received so much support through programs like the Millennium Challenge Corporation and so on, which is a lot of financial support, economic support on energy projects and so on, but they are dependent on you delivering on rule of law, democracy, and human rights. When you deliver on these elements, you also get support. But it was important that, the president of tiny little Kosovo was standing in front of the countries, very big countries from the entire African continent and the United States, and we were the example that was showcased to the world. Kosovo, not some other country. Kosovo was showcased as the example. So again, there are instruments of soft power that you can use, but again, Kosovo is not just the success story of its own people. Obviously, it's primarily the sacrifice of our people, our liberation struggle. But it's your success story too.